But one thing that has really struck out to me amidst all of this is that our very own home state of Colorado is pretty notoriously absent from all of these pivots. And in fact, is not only continuing status quo, it's frankly doubling down and going much further. We just talked about that dramatic Public Utilities Commission decision that set a 100% decarbonization target for the natural gas industry in the state. Governor Jared Polis, it's very likely that he's going to be pushing a bill in this upcoming session that's going to accelerate the state's carbon timeline by a full decade. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy here in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. And for this week's show, Amy and I wanted to chat a little bit about sort of a macro topic that we've, I think, both noticed, quite frankly, it's been hard to miss in politics of late. And that has to do with a little bit of a retrenchment that you're starting to see amongst primarily Democrats in progressive-leaning states and jurisdictions across the country, looking at their sort of cutting-edge, very restrictive climate laws, renewable mandates, natural gas bans, you name it, and wondering if they should maybe back off a little bit, all in service of pursuing what this new hot-button topic in politics is, and that's affordability. You've seen it in places like New York, Massachusetts, California, and frankly, there's been some other states where maybe that focus is a little absent.
Yeah. For sure. And we'll tell you which one. So you're going to want to hang around and hear which one it is, because you just may be experiencing it a little bit. But let's set up a couple of things, Jake. First of all, remember when the initial, we're going to have a 10% renewable mandate, then it was 20%, then it was 30%. And the whole time, what did we hear? If we go to wind and solar, it will save ratepayers money.
Yep.
Because wind and solar are free. What they don't tell you is that converting them into electricity is wildly expensive. Yes, the resource is free, but turning it into usable power requires quite a lot. So it's expensive. The infrastructure, all of it is expensive. So keep that. That's part of the context. The other part of the context is the recent narrative that the Democrats have been trying to hang on the Trump administration, in that high utility rates are the fault of the Trump administration because of the OB3, or One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Because somehow, if you phase out subsidies in 2028, and it's not retroactive to anything today, somehow that drives up costs right now. We all know that that's ridiculous and silly. So a couple of things recently. One is this whole affordability, and Politico has dubbed these last elections, dubbed them the electricity elections. I listen to Politico's podcast all the time. I also read their newsletter, and they have been harping on this, that Democrats can win on the affordability of electricity, and they're hanging, the high rates that you're paying for your electric bill is Donald Trump's fault. Well, so a couple of things have been pushing back on that, and one is there was a study released, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn or my own organization, but Always On Energy Research partnered with the Institute for Energy Research. Two of us came together and produced something we call Blue States High Rates. And bottom line is, elections have consequences, and in many blue states, those consequences are higher electric rates, which then brings us to this whole thing that Jake was mentioning about the embracing of these restrictive, environmental and climate policies, 100% renewable mandates, net zero, bans on gas appliances in Colorado, just the ban on natural gas. Prepare for that. The whole point of that driving up your costs. But here's what we've been noticing, that you see blue state governors that are backtracking. They're moving away from their own policy, which begs the question, and I will say it was an article in The Hill. It was a column in The Hill. It wasn't an article. It was an opinion piece in The Hill from Isaac Warren and Mitch Rolling, who were two of the authors of Blue States' High Rates, which the question they ask, and I think it's a good one, if Democrat policies make energy affordable, remember, it saves you money, then why are they backtracking from their own policies? And I think that's the question, and what you start to realize, it's because it doesn't save you money. It doesn't. And in fact, I'm looking, 73% of U.S. residents are now concerned about their electricity and gas bills rising this year. And listen to this, I think this is astonishing too, and then we can get to some of the other stuff. 80% of Americans admitted that they feel powerless over how much they are charged. Are you listening, Public Utilities Commissions? Mm-hmm. And then electricity prices. So remember, they're trying to tag this all onto Donald Trump. Electricity prices increased 27% from January 2021 through January 2025. 27%. So the question then becomes, again, we'll get back to it. So if renewable mandates, if wind and solar, if banning natural gas is supposed to be affordable, and wind and solar are free, so therefore it's going to be cheap, why are Democrat governors in these blue states backing away? And when I say blue states, I'm not talking about North Carolina, where they have a Democrat governor and almost a supermajority of Republicans in the legislature. I'm talking about, we're talking about, think New York or California. So the trend is very real, and there's a reason for it.
Absolutely. And you point out the Hill op-ed from Isaac and Mitch, who also PowerGab guests in the past, great energy analysts, but they do great work just noting state after state and policy after policy from, like you said, some of, quite frankly, the most progressive states in the country. It's, to your point, it's not Kentucky or North Carolina or, a state that happens to have a Democratic governor, but it's fairly swingy or even red-leaning. No, these are states that have been progressive for a long time, continue to be progressive, will almost certainly elect another Democrat to replace these governors that are making these steps. And New York in particular is the most fascinating one to me, because New York obviously has been at the forefront of climate policy for a long time, very progressive, but there, Governor Kathy Hochul seems to be doing just about everything she can to just rescind everything.
Or just ignore it.
Or ignore it.
Just ignore it. Like she didn't even pass it.
A lot of them are delayed. That's a good point. A lot of them are just saying, yeah, I know this is law, but we're just not going to let that go into effect.
Just not going to do it.
I think that'll be politically inconvenient for me, which does beg the question. I thought all of this was supposed to be free. I thought this was all supposed to be to the benefit of the energy consumers in these respective states. Why do you have to repeal things like a cap and trade mandate that they have in New York? Why do you have to repeal the state's electrification mandate in buildings? Why do you have to repeal the renewables, X percentage of renewables by a certain deadline? I thought all of that was supposed to be to the benefit of both the environment and consumers, and it was just greedy oil and gas companies and greedy utilities standing in the way. It's amazing what a little bit of political pressure will do to make folks realize what we've been saying all along has been the case.
So this is what the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, that's the name of it in New York, and it requires New York to produce 70% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2030 and 100% by 2040. Are you listening, Colorado?
Yeah, no kidding.
Might want to, now here, it's nowhere near meeting those goals. It's just not. And by the way, Kathy Hochul at the exact same time has approved natural gas pipelines going through New York. Now remember, all renewables. That's where they're supposed to be by 2040 and 70% by 2030. Here's what New York's Department of Environmental Conservation has said about implementing these regulations. They said doing it now would be infeasible because it would impose extraordinary and damaging costs upon New Yorkers. I'm going to say that again. They can't do it right now, according to the Department of Environmental Conservation, because extraordinary and damaging costs upon New Yorkers. What happened to it's free?
Right.
It's going to save ratepayers money. And, so are we kind of mocking it a little bit? 100%. Yep. That's true. Because we were, not literally, figuratively bludgeoned with it's going to save ratepayers money and it's going to be free. And what's not to like? Right. I'm old enough to remember Max Tyler saying that. What's not to like? It's free. It creates jobs. It's going to save ratepayers money. What's not to like? Well, what's not to like is the fact that it's driving up the cost of electricity. And Kathy Hochul knows it. And by the way, she wants to be reelected.
Right.
And she's being primaried.
Yeah, no, and that's sort of the broader discussion is how much this sticks. Obviously, the people that, to your point, have an incentive of getting the votes of the people that are facing these high costs are clearly trying to pivot. And we are having a little fun here about people coming a little bit late to the party that we've been pointing out for how many years now. But there's something to be said for I like when politicians flip flop as long as they're flip flopping to my side, to what I've been saying on policy, but. Not everyone sees it that way. And there is sort of this brewing civil war on that side of the aisle between folks that are maybe waking up to the reality and the discomfort amongst ratepayers and energy bills and are even, open to embracing things like the oil and gas industry, which that side of the aisle has spurned so much. And then there's this other faction that says, no, we need to double down. Now is not the time to backtrack. You're just giving a win to the fossil fuel lobby or to Donald Trump or XYZ, name your enemy. And that's what these folks are doing. And there was actually a great op-ed in the New York Times to that effect about where at least some people think that the the Democratic Party should go on energy for this very reason.
Yeah, so I want to say one last thing about Kathy Hochul, and then we want to get to what the New York Times said. Or I shouldn't say the New York Times. The fact that they actually published this. Now, remember, this is the exact same news organization that fired Barry Weiss because she allowed Tom Cotton they fired their other publisher and then she left.
Yeah.
But the point, or their other editorial page editor, not the publisher, the editorial page editor, because they allowed Tom Cotton,
sitting U.S. senator,
to pen an op-ed and to have it published. But Kathy Hochul says, it said in an interview, she wants to make sure that, and this is Kathy Hochul, I'm not doing something that's going to drive up costs for consumers, and the data shows at this time it would. So re-elections matter, right. And elections do have consequences, which brings us to midterms and what this New York Times op-ed said, and this is Matt Yglesias, and we're talking before the show. He's been moderating of late, as others have, and there are a couple of things he says in an op-ed, which, by the way, the title of it, Obama supported it, the left in Canada and Norway does. Why don't Democrats? That's the question and what he's talking about. And I'll just get to the punchline. He says about, 4 paragraphs in, liberals should support America's oil and gas industry. Now, Colorado progressive left, settle down. This did appear in the New York Times. I get that is probably blasphemy to your ears. We understand. But, and by the way, notice how he wrote that. He says liberals should support America's oil and gas industry. What he doesn't say is progressives. So, and I think that's probably because he knows they won't.
Right. Yeah. No, they have a blood feud against the oil and gas industry that I don't see abating anytime soon.
And he even says, this won't be popular with everyone on the left. I go, well, there's an understatement. Yeah. Clearly, he hasn't been to Colorado recently. But anyway, so yeah, Matt Yglesias is saying in the New York Times, in an op-ed that the New York Times published, they put it out on their news site, that Democrats should start embracing the oil and gas industry in the United States, because what he is talking about is winning.
Right.
Winning politically. He says, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good.
Right. And I think, quite frankly, is fairly sage advice from a political analysis standpoint. But one thing that comes, so you have all this evidence. You have the great study that Mitch and Isaac did with the folks at IER. You have the op-ed that did in The Hill pointing out all the different state governors that are backtracking on this stuff. You have longtime liberal pundits like Matt Yglesias taking to the pages of the New York Times, the Gray Lady itself, talking about how Democrats ought to embrace oil and gas for affordability purposes and American energy dominance purposes. But one thing that has really struck out to me amidst all of this, which it's a fascinating story in and of itself that this is happening, is that our very own home state of Colorado is pretty notoriously absent from all of these pivots. And in fact, is not only continuing status quo, it's frankly doubling down and going much further. We just talked about that dramatic Public Utilities Commission decision that set a 100% decarbonization target for the natural gas industry in the state, meaning natural gas must cease to exist by mid-century. You have Governor Jared Polis. We've talked about this. It's very likely that he's going to be pushing a bill in this upcoming session that's going to accelerate the state's carbon mandate timeline, not backtrack or not put a pause on it. No, accelerate it by a full decade. You have who, frankly, could be the very next governor of Colorado, Michael Bennet, coming out with one of his first. He hasn't put out, frankly, that many policy proposals, but one thing he did make sure to drop was that he wants a cap and trade program in the state of Colorado, which a cap and trade program necessarily increase costs. That's how it works. It imposes costs on carbon emitting industries like the oil and gas industry.
And didn't Josh Shapiro, Democrat governor in Pennsylvania, just back out of it?
Shapiro pulled out Pennsylvania. Hochul is delaying theirs in New York. And yet Michael Bennet says, now's the time. I think Colorado is ready for this. And I'm going to hang my hat on that becoming the state's energy policy when I'm governor. And so that to me is even more fascinating. The fact that Colorado is not only absent from something we're seeing from far more progressive states, but is going further in the opposite direction.
And I will say this, Matt Yglesias also writes this, insisting on a majority of renewable electricity raises costs dramatically. So this whole narrative of that wind and solar saves ratepayers money, it's a house of cards that is collapsing pretty rapidly. I also like this, and this gets to the point of why I think they actually are delaying. Besides, there's cost. There's just the cost. There's also the reliability issue.
Yep.
And Matt writes, the utility of fossil fuels is not something the oil and gas industry tricked the public into. Now, that would be news to the ears of the environmental NGOs in this state, because they're pretty sure you aren't smart enough to know that the oil and gas industry does nothing but spew out disinformation and that they're only there to save you. But goes on to say, there is not currently any technologically viable substitute to oil as a fuel for things like airplanes and large ocean-going vessels on which global commerce depends. He's 100% right on that. And I would say too, Jake, that we're here on Thursday, December 18th. It is the day after this significant power outage. Part of it was planned. More than half of it was not planned. And people still don't have power.
Yep.
Here's the thing with electricity. We are, as Colorado is pushing more and more people onto a system that can't support it, just this electric grid system, and essentially banning the use of natural gas in the near future. We are going, to your point, the exact opposite direction of these other progressive left states. And I would say in part that's because Jared Polis doesn't have an election to, and I should say too, and the cost in Colorado, you say, well, our rates aren't as high as California's or New York, but let me tell you something. Colorado's residential rates are 16.7 cents right now. That's residential. The Mountain West is 14.8 cents a kilowatt. That's a kilowatt hour. We are significantly higher than the average of the Mountain West, and we're higher. Our residential rates are higher than any state in the Mountain West. We have the highest rates. You can't just look at it nationally. You have to look at it regionally. And in the Mountain West, we're the ones, if you want to look at outliers, they're going, yeah, throw out Colorado because they're an outlier. Their rates are high. But I suspect that if we continue down this path, Jake, we are going to be more than just an outlier. We're going to be an island.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And to your point, just because California is a basket case doesn't necessarily mean we're trending in the right direction. And quite frankly, I seem to remember, I think we covered this on a PowerGab episode several months ago, but I seem to recall PUC Chair Eric Blank looking at load growth forecasts and the trajectory of the state's energy policy and saying that we're on track to hit California level energy prices if we don't control this properly. And so it's not out of the question that we do get to that basket case point, even as states elsewhere sort of wake up and try to pull back. But as we're coming up on time here, Amy, do you have any last minute thoughts for our listeners or takeaways from this topic?
Yeah, and I would say that not only that, but remember, Jared Polis also knows that because he sent out that memo and said, everybody get together. If we don't manage this property, if we don't manage this, how about properly, we're going to end up looking like California, and we're going to end up looking like other states, progressive left states that are a basket case. And to your point, just because California does it doesn't mean we have to do it. I should ask this question. Should we tell about about our contest?
Oh, yes. I think that'll be particularly interesting, especially after this week.
Yeah. I think so too. So real quick, we've teased this a little bit for the last, I don't know, couple of months, I think, but we've actually finally nailed down it. We can be slow moving on contests, but I promise you this will be fun. We actually are going to give away a generator. And the way we're going to do it is beginning with the first show in 2026. We're going to go to each show beginning in 2026. You can practice now, but go 2026 is when we're going to start the real contest. And it's the first one after the first of the year. We're going to find and it's subjective, I get it, but our show. Yeah,
host privilege.
Our rules. The funny, we're looking for the funniest, pithiest, most clever, whatever comment that you drop on the YouTube channel. If you put it in there, we're going to pick one comment out of each show. We'll narrow that, and we'll even share. We'll share them. And you guys can go yay or nay. But the point is, we'll eventually narrow those down to 3 comments. And then we're going to let you all vote on it. But that's going to go for, did we say I
think we're aiming sometime mid-year next year.
Yeah, so it's going to go for a while. So you have time to practice. And, we might pick you more than once if you're really clever. But the point is you have to go in and drop a pithy, clever, fun comment or drop a comment on the YouTube channel under the show, but it begins in the first show in 2026. And then we have, Damon called it a predator generator. I don't know. It seems a little scary to me, but I just want a generator. I don't need it to be a predator, but maybe you do. So anyway, it's called the predator generator. That's what we're going to be giving away at probably mid-year after we've gotten comments, and then we'll narrow them down. Then we're going to let you all vote, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, we wanted to do our part. We always tell you folks to get a generator, and we thought, we should walk the walk, and so folks should start sending those comments in, and like you said, look for that in the new year.
Yeah.
But that does it for us on another episode here of PowerGab. If folks like what they saw, they can head over to powergab.org to check out our entire back catalog. That's also where you can find the videos to submit those comments. And if folks want to listen to us wherever they get their audio-only podcasts, we're available at Apple and Spotify. And if you'd like to reach out to us to suggest future show topics, you can send that our way at info@powergab.org. We always love hearing from you guys. But until next week, we'll see you.